Hey guys, before we jump into the video, if you haven't watched previous part yet, I've got you covered. The link is in the description. Get ready to dive into an unforgettable tale, where every moment counts and every choice shapes the future. So, sit back, relax, and let the story begin. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. I know you're a bit nervous, Harry, but you have to forgive them, Hagrid said, patting Harry's shoulder with what he thought was a light touch. If it weren't for you defeating who the night you were born, no one knows what the wizarding world would look like now. They're truly grateful to you, really grateful. Like I said, you're a celebrity. I think you're even more famous than the Minister of Magic. A baby can't possibly defeat an adult wizard. Hagrid, Harry said calmly, unmoved by the admiration and praise from those people earlier. It must have been some magic my parents used to protect me. No one knew better than Harry himself what he used to be like. You never know, Hagrid said, eyeing Harry up and down with a chuckle. I've got a newspaper clipping saved back at my place. You'll see it when you start school. What newspaper? Harry was momentarily confused, but Hagrid decided to keep it a mystery and said nothing more. See that trash bin, Harry? Hagrid stopped in front of a wall and raised his hand. Count 3 bricks up, then 2 bricks across there. With a gentle tap of his umbrella tip on the final brick, the wall began shifting and retracting in all directions, soon revealing a whole new world. Welcome, Harry, welcome to Diagon Alley, Hagrid announced, though he couldn't spot any sign of shock on Harry's face. Ahead lay a winding cobblestone street that stretched out of sight, lined on both sides by shops filled with all sorts of unique and magical items. Unlike the Muggle streets outside, the people here dressed in ways that suited the image of wizards perfectly. Dumbledore was right. Every young wizard's first exploration of the magical world shouldn't be ruined. Even Harry found himself excited by the mystery and wonder of this strange new realm. Adventure and discovery had always been among his favorite pursuits. In front of one shop, a magical cauldron stirred itself. A wizard travel agency advertised terrifying journeys promising unprecedented experiences. A parchment store displayed rolls that unrolled and flattened themselves while a quill scribbled away on them. But as a druid, what truly rooted Harry in place were the herb shops. Too many unfamiliar herbs were displayed there. One mushroom, though plucked and boxed, still hopped around non-stop. Another herb, called spider egg bloom, had green berries on both sides and roots that looked exactly like a spider's legs. Harry's attention was completely absorbed by these magical herbs. In Azeroth, 2 of his key professions were herbalism and blacksmithing. Herbalism was something he picked up from the Tauren, providing extra rewards during his global adventures and offering materials for blacksmithing, which also helped him earn some money. Harry particularly enjoyed crafting his own gear, believing it fit him better that way. After several unsuccessful attempts to drag Harry away, Hagrid finally resorted to lifting him up and carrying him out of the herb shop. Harry, stiff as a board, kept his eyes locked on the wondrous herbs inside. Despite this, Hagrid still had to cover the cost for Harry to bring back a batch of lavender hibiscus and sage, since Harry hadn't yet withdrawn money from Gringotts. Honestly, Harry, I'm starting to think you'd be perfect for Hufflepuff, Hagrid muttered as he finally set Harry down after walking a good distance to ensure he wouldn't run back. Professor Sprout would love your passion for herbs, though. Well, all right, it's just a hobby, Harry said dismissively, raising a sprig of lavender hibiscus to his nose. Do centaurs really use this in divination? Do you know the exact process? Harry's decision to buy those herbs was prompted by the shopkeeper's claim that centaurs would burn lavender hibiscus and sage together to divine the future. According to the shopkeeper, centaurs, magical creatures, though Hagrid whispered they wouldn't appreciate being called that, resembled the centaurs in Harry's memories, though they seemed far more peaceful and weaker here. In Harry's past experience, the best centaur was typically a dead one. However, in this world, centaurs were listed as magical creatures protected by wizards, and their divination skills were highly sought after and expensive. Hiring a centaur for divination required not only significant material costs but also the right connections. But that wasn't the point. The point was that, As a shaman and a seer recognized by the Tauren tribe, Harry also possessed the ability to predict the future and foresee omens. Some of these prophecies came from whispers of the elements, warnings from elemental beings, or guidance from ancestral spirits. Others arose directly from Harry himself, intangible spiritual premonitions. This not only made his prophecies more accurate but also made him a thorn in the side of many. Due to the independent and elusive nature of elemental spirits, shamans in the Tauren tribe traditionally had to interpret and convey the elements' messages themselves. Because of this intermediary role, misunderstandings occasionally occurred, such as misinterpreting elemental warnings or ancestral guidance. There were even instances where demons disguised themselves as elemental spirits, leading orcs astray. Sometimes these interpretations seemed cryptic, lacking a direct connection for those unable to hear the spirits themselves. But Harry was different, very different. Unlike traditional shamans, Harry could directly convey the whispers of the elements into understandable speech. Under certain conditions, he could even project brief glimpses of the future onto a water screen for everyone to see, offering them a clear vision of what lay ahead. This unique ability naturally drew suspicion from some wizards. Well, let's be honest. Many believed those so-called future glimpses were illusions conjured by Harry's magic. But that skepticism diminished after a bronze dragon named Chromie paid a visit. Bronze dragons were the guardians of the timeline in Azeroth, their dragonflight led by one of the great dragon aspects. Harry's extraordinary prophetic abilities set him apart from other shamans, allowing him to rise above rivals and earn the title of seer, a figure tasked with guiding the Tauren tribe, safeguarding them from danger, and charting their path forward. Harry once wondered why his powers manifested so differently and uniquely from other shamans after embracing their path. But now he understood. It all stemmed from the unique magic within him, originating from another world. Such extraordinary magic. Even after an in-depth discussion with Gianna, Harry developed a unique divination spell of his own, bringing a sense of structure to the otherwise chaotic art of shamanistic prophecy. "Oh, centaur divination, you mean?" Hagrid shrugged as they walked through Diagon Alley. "You know, I can't use magic myself, but even if I could, I'd never make sense of what centaurs say. Honestly, not many wizards can. They're always going on about the stars. Too bright, too dim, something like that. Or they'll say things you can't make heads or tails of." Hagrid sighed. "I can't understand it myself, but there are plenty of wizards who swear by centaur divination." "But honestly, Harry, you didn't need to buy those herbs," Hagrid said, glancing at the bag of lavender and sage in Harry's hand. "The Forbidden Forest has plenty of that stuff. Once you're back at Hogwarts, I could gather some for you, though I didn't think you'd be interested in divination." "I have a few ideas I want to try," Harry replied vaguely, quickly steering the conversation elsewhere. "The Forbidden Forest. Does it really have so much good stuff?" Well, maybe it wasn't a complete change of topic. Harry was genuinely curious. The name alone conjured images of magical herbs, rare and priceless specimens, or perhaps even a variety of magical creatures classified by wizards. Just the word forbidden felt enticing. "Hey, Harry, your eyes are practically glowing. You know that?" Hagrid laughed heartily, then warned, "But don't get any ideas about playing in the Forbidden Forest. Students aren't allowed in there, and I'm not about to let you in either. Merlin knows it nearly killed me trying to get the Weasley twins out of there once." Hagrid sighed heavily. "Still," he added thoughtfully, "if the stars align and the centaurs hold one of their rituals, I could take you to see how they divine the future. You've got quite the reputation with them, and I'm on decent terms with the centaurs." Hagrid muttered under his breath. "At least they're more reliable than the divination professor." "Hogwarts has divination classes?" Harry asked, catching that last part. "Though the professor doesn't sound particularly reliable?" "Don't ask, Harry. Don't ask," Hagrid exclaimed loudly. "I'm not one to badmouth my colleagues." A fine sentiment indeed. Though, judging by his reaction, Hagrid had already said plenty. "All right, we won't talk about it," Harry said, tucking the lavender back into his bag. "Let's go withdraw some money. I can't wait." Turning coins into gear and supplies, diving into adventures, and then turning treasures from adventures back into coins. Harry suddenly felt like he'd returned to a familiar rhythm since stepping into Diagon Alley. Now, it was time to gather his seed money for the journey ahead. Harry realized that it wasn't just his body that felt young again, his heart did too. The connection between body and spirit was undeniable. At least for now, he felt the same excitement he'd felt when he first left Thunderbluff to explore the outside world. From Thunderbluff to Fellwood Forest, from Kalimdor to the Eastern Kingdoms, that sense of joy stayed with Harry until he saw the goblins at Gringotts. Apologies, I mean goblins. So similar. Too similar. Aside from being a bit taller, they were strikingly similar to the goblins Harry remembered. Especially the warning about thieves on the wall near the entrance and the goblins' dismissive attitudes when they glanced at Harry and Hagrid's clothing. Harry never imagined that his first reminder of Azeroth in this world would come from goblins. Instinctively, he clutched his non-existent wallet, then remembered he didn't have one yet. Wonderful. The inheritance Harry's parents had left him was far greater than he'd imagined. After a harrowing ride on the minecart, the vault door opened to reveal a literal mountain of gold coins. Silver and bronze coins barely caught his attention. Honestly, the Gringotts carts reminded Harry of the goblin racing events. Those wild, death-defying tournaments where only the craziest goblins participated, aiming to destroy their rivals and cross the finish line alive. Fast, thrilling, and nearly as stomach-churning as being snatched mid-air by a dragon. After gaining a rough understanding of the wizarding world's economy, Harry judged that the money in front of him was more than enough for 7 years of school and plenty of leisure, and he wouldn't need to work for years after graduation. On top of that, there were magical artifacts lining the shelves of the vault. Harry gave them a quick glance but decided to leave them be, focusing instead on stuffing Hagrid's pouch with gold coins. He even insisted on paying for the lavender and sage, despite Hagrid's protests. After all, Harry suspected the pouch itself was quite valuable. While it wasn't the kind of bag he remembered from Azeroth, divided into countless compartments, it had a similar function. Deceptively small but capable of holding a great deal. Another hair-raising minecart ride later, Harry accompanied Hagrid to retrieve something from a deeper vault. Hagrid was tight-lipped about what it was, and Harry didn't pry. Tauren know how to respect privacy. "Sorry, Harry," Hagrid said shakily after they finally exited Gringotts. "I think I need a drink. You know, that damned cart nearly did me in. Why don't you go buy your robes? That might take a bit of time." "Completely understandable," Harry agreed, his own complexion pale. "Don't worry, Hagrid. I won't wander off." "All right, see you in a bit." Hagrid hesitated, taking in Harry's unusually composed demeanor. "Of course, see you soon." Watching Hagrid's slightly unsteady figure disappear toward the leaky cauldron, Harry turned back and re-entered Gringotts. "Sir." The goblin at the door looked puzzled as Harry approached. "Is something the matter?" "I need a favor," Harry said, brushing back his hair to reveal the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. This scar, present since birth, was said to mark him as the vanquisher of the Dark Lord. After his earlier experience at the leaky cauldron, Harry fully understood how significant this scar was to the wizarding world. "By Merlin!" Predictably, the goblin's eyes widened. "You're Harry Potter." It was a reaction Harry was growing used to. People gasping, lowering their voices, and whispering his name in awe. "Yes, that's me," Harry replied calmly, letting his hair fall back into place. He extended a hand toward the goblin. "I need some help. Would you be willing?" "Of course." The goblin's demeanor shifted instantly, becoming warm and eager. "It would be my honor to assist the famous Harry Potter. My name is Copperclaw. What can I do for you?" Naturally, Copperclaw's sudden enthusiasm wasn't just due to Harry's name or scar. It was the gold galleon Harry had discreetly pressed into his hand during the handshake. Harry was an expert at dealing with goblins. He knew they loved wealth in all its forms but were even more enamored by the thrill of acquiring it. A single galleon might not bribe a wizard, but for a goblin it was more than enough, especially for something trivial. "I've heard that goblins have always been the best craftsmen," Harry said quietly, pulling Copperclaw aside. Do you know of any reliable smiths? I need a weapon forged, perhaps some armor as well. Harry hadn't abandoned his plan for self-protection. He had simply taken a different approach. While he longed to forge his own armor and weapons like he had in Azeroth, he was painfully aware of his current limitations. His young body lacked the strength and stamina for smithing. But until he could forge his own gear, he wasn't about to leave himself defenseless. Having deduced from Hagrid's reaction that wizards largely dismissed melee weapons and armor, Harry guessed that blacksmiths had long disappeared from Diagon Alley. Instead, he'd learned through subtle questioning that goblins might still preserve the craft. Weapons? Armor? Copperclaw gave Harry a surprised look, clearly not expecting such a request from a wizard. Of course, Copperclaw said with a wide grin. I know a master smith, but I'll pay generously for both his services and yours, Harry said calmly. But let me remind you, my goblin friend, I'm Harry Potter. Think about the Ministry of Magic. Of course, Copperclaw's smile faltered briefly. He sighed, muttering, Harry Potter. Big name, big trouble. Maybe I shouldn't have taken that galleon in the first place. But if you had the chance again, you'd take it anyway. Naturally, Copperclaw replied without hesitation. Why wouldn't I? Easy money. Harry had expected no less. In their agreement, Harry would pay up to 100 galleons for a half-plate armor set and a warhammer with a shield, a price 300 galleons less than the monthly salary of the Minister of Magic. For Copperclaw, this was no more than a toy. Just think about Harry's requirements for a moment. First of all, the armor and weapons couldn't be too large, because Harry was at an age where he was still growing. As a result, the armor was a simplified version, enough to protect his chest, back, arms, and legs, but without gloves or bracers. In fact, it was basically just a breastplate and greaves, adjustable to Harry's size, thanks to a flexible structure with gaps. This same design, however, lowered its protective capabilities, which explained its affordability. Another reason for its low cost was that the armor and weapons weren't truly magical. In Azeroth, they'd be classified as white-tier equipment, utterly ordinary. Any Muggle blacksmith could make something similar, so naturally, they weren't worth much. Until Harry could craft his own weapons and armor, he planned to make do with these simplified versions. To Coppering, Harry Potter's peculiar, almost archaic request seemed like a child's whimsical fancy, a celebrity's little plaything. But in Harry's eyes, these were no mere toys. Even if this gear was nothing more than basic white-tier equipment, wearing it enabled him to meet the criteria for casting certain spells. As for the 3 cloth robes he'd bought at Madame Malkin's Robes for all occasions, Harry only planned to use them as cloaks to avoid attracting attention. After all, in the wizarding world, he was already drawing quite enough of that. The fitting process for the robes passed without incident. Although, there was one blonde boy who, clearly bored, kept trying to strike up a conversation with Harry. Harry, however, ignored him. The boy's tone and the subtle arrogance in his words activated Harry's internal alarms. Without a doubt, this was a poorly raised child, and Harry had no intention of helping to rectify someone else's parenting mistakes, so long as the boy didn't cross him. After the measurements were done, Harry requested a copy of his dimensions from Madame Malkin, planning to send them to Coppering via Owl to commission a set of fitted armor. Hagrid was waiting outside for him, holding a cage containing a snowy owl classified as a snow owl. "Birthday present, Harry," Hagrid said with a broad grin. "Hope ya like her. I figured ya wouldn't be one fair toads or anything, so I picked out this fine young lady. Ain't she beautiful?" "She's wonderful, Hagrid," Harry said earnestly. "Thank you. I needed an owl to send messages, and she's perfect. A friend's gift always lifts the spirits." Returning to the world where he was born, Harry felt as though he'd made his first true friend, a giant who pretended not to be a giant. "Glad ya like her," Hagrid said, scratching his unruly hair in delight. "Now, there's just one last thing. We need to get ya a wand." "A wand?" "Let me repeat. No one can resist the thrill of getting new gear. No one, not even Harry." The wand shop where wizards purchased their weapons matched Harry's earlier imaginings perfectly. It had a distinct old-world charm but was meticulously maintained, without a speck of dust in sight. Ollivander's wand shop felt incredibly cramped. Even though Hagrid didn't come in, muttering excuses as he stayed outside, Harry still found the space tight. Shelves lined with long boxes stretched to the ceiling on either side, and some open boxes revealed wands resting inside. A room full of magical weapons. Harry judged them to be at least blue tier in quality, with a few epic purple tier ones mixed in. Perhaps even more extraordinary, these wands seemed to have their own spirits, which made them all the more precious. After all, shamans believe everything has a spirit: storms, fire, water, nature, animals, even ancestors. Shamans communicate with these unseen spirits, relying on them for guidance and strength. Naturally, Harry quickly sensed the spirits of the wands. It was as if they were trying to communicate with him, but their voices were too faint. Oddly enough, though he'd been in the shop for some time, no one had come out to greet him. Still, Harry thought that if all he had to do was choose a wand, he could handle that on his own. Closing his eyes, Harry listened to the call of the spirits. The countless wands displayed in the shop transformed into a multitude of leaping souls, each vying for his attention. This one was too lively. Harry preferred something more composed. That one was too passive. It barely stirred in response to his call. Some were cool and reserved. Others were agitated and reckless. Some surged forward boldly, while others seemed restless and uncertain. Frankly, Harry was overwhelmed by the variety. Fortunately, after carefully sensing each one, Harry finally stopped in front of a particular shelf. Opening his eyes, he stood on tiptoe and deftly pulled down a box from the top row. Inside lay a wand, resting calmly in its place. It was as black as obsidian, with a matte surface so smooth it resembled polished jade. Its understated elegance exuded a quiet strength that demanded attention. Clap, clap, clap. Harry looked up to see an old man with silvery white hair standing on the mezzanine, gazing at him. The man's pale eyes shone like twin moons in the dim shop. "Marvelous, simply marvelous," Ollivander said softly, his voice full of wonder. "It seems you've made your choice." Harry had the distinct impression that Ollivander wasn't just speaking to him, but also to the wand in his hand. "Such remarkable talent, my boy," Ollivander said with genuine delight. "I always thought only members of the Ollivander family or those who've worked with wands for years could see their glow. Yet here you are, so young, and already able to perceive it." "I only saw their spirits, really," Harry said modestly, noting Ollivander's choice of words for the wands and matching his phrasing. "You have an incredible gift too, sir." The compliment was heartfelt. If Ollivander could sense and communicate with the wand spirits, Harry thought, he was the most likely candidate for a shaman among all the wizards Harry had met so far. Spirit? That term sounds like something an African shaman might say. Ollivander chuckled a few times. "But as far as I know, many of the spells at Wagadu are cast using fingers or hand gestures. Wagadu is Africa's premier wizarding school, holding the same esteemed status as Hogwarts and boasting a history of over 1,000 years. It's an internationally renowned institution. If a wand can enhance the power of magic, then I think using a wand is the optimal choice," Harry responded. "That's a rare perspective, Mr. Potter." Ollivander gave Harry a surprised glance. "From what I know, most wizards aspire to silent or wandless magic because it represents both convenience and personal strength, even though the power of spells tends to diminish without the use of a wand." "That sounds self-defeating," Harry mused, carefully choosing a less confrontational term. "If there's effective equipment available, why not use it? Especially when it can amplify one's abilities. After all, weapons should be the best you can find. Even guardians, who stand at the pinnacle of the magical profession, still rely on wands to stabilize their magical flow and enhance their power." To Harry, deliberately forgoing a tool that clearly enhanced one's abilities to cast spells was an incomprehensible choice. "Well, it does look impressive, and of course it's convenient," Ollivander replied, increasingly fond of Harry's practical view on wands. "Mr. Potter, if you're truly interested in wands, I'd be delighted to take you on as an apprentice when you're in your 7th year. As I mentioned earlier, you have quite the talent. However, 7 years is a bit far off, and it's too early to make such decisions. Ollivander continued without waiting for Harry's reply. Right now, Mr. Potter, what you should be more concerned with is the wand in your hand. Yes, the wand. Ollivander's voice dropped to a somber tone as he seemed to drift into memories. Your eyes are the same as your mother's, a lovely shade of emerald. She purchased her first wand here, 10¼ inches. Willow wood. Your father, on the other hand, preferred a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, with stronger power, particularly suited for transfiguration. Harry found the old man's memory far sharper than he had imagined. Or perhaps it was simply because his family was so famous. And now, Mr. Potter. Ollivander suddenly leaned closer, his gaze gleaming with a mysterious light. Harry noticed he was actually peering through the fringe of his hair at the scar on his forehead. Everything is different now. I once thought you would end up with this wand, Ollivander muttered, retrieving a wand from the shelves. Hollywood, phoenix feather core, 11 inches long. What's most important is the core. It shares the same core as the wand that left you that scar. What could this mean? Have you transcended your destiny? Broken free from its bonds? But why? What happened? Ollivander fell into contemplative silence. Voldemort's wand? Harry ventured, piecing together what Ollivander seemed to imply. Oh, don't say that name, child. Ollivander shuddered visibly, snapping out of his reverie. Pointing to the box Harry held, he added, Take it up. 13½ inches. Ebony, with a Thunderbird tail feather core. Harry hesitated not a moment before picking up the wand. He couldn't quite describe the sensation. It was as if his arm had extended, warm and perfectly under his control. The air filled with a scent of fresh grass, reminiscent of what Harry had smelled on Thunder Bluff, mingled with the warmth of sunlight on his skin and the faint rumble of distant thunder. Ollivander clapped his hands once more. Talent, pure talent, he said, wiping away a tear from the corner of his eye. Only a rare few are able to find a wand truly suited to them. Ebony wands typically choose individuals with the courage to be themselves, those who defy convention and thrive as outsiders, Ollivander explained, speaking of wand materials with expertise. You are someone who can ignore external pressures and hold steadfast to your beliefs, Mr. Potter. How extraordinary. Why did I ever think of pairing such an unconventional wand with a Thunderbird tail feather core? Though it does enhance the wand's power, especially in transfiguration, it also makes it far more challenging to master. I truly thought this wand would remain here forever. You will accomplish great things, Mr. Potter. Great things. Amid Ollivander's cryptic ramblings, Harry left the shop, 7 galleons lighter. To be honest, Ollivander's eccentricity made Harry think he'd make an excellent shaman. A traditional shaman. Got your wand, eh? Hagrid, waiting by the door, looked relieved. Took you long enough. How's the new wand feel? Perfect, Harry replied eagerly, his new equipment in hand. I can't wait to test it out. It was this sense of discovery and novelty that had driven Harry's love of adventure during his time in Azeroth. A thirst for the unknown. Under Hagrid's guidance, Harry gathered all his supplies, including books beyond the required reading list. Anything that piqued his interest. This prompted Hagrid to mutter something about Harry being sorted into Ravenclaw, while earning him a 50% discount at Flourish and Blots. Don't ask why. Just know that Harry Potter shopping for books was an event worth commemorating. The price for the discount, leaving a signed copy of his name for the shopkeeper, a small perk of fame. But for Harry, the most important thing upon returning to number 4 Privet Drive was performing a ritual. A traditional shamanic ceremony, ancient and reverent, paying homage to the elements and spirits. Harry planned to attempt his first true invocation of the elements in this world. Many believe that shamans serve the elemental forces, acting as their subordinates. In truth, their relationship is often one of mutual communication and equality. Elementals possess their own will. They can experience joy, anger, betrayal, and even hostility toward one another. The role of a shaman is to maintain balance among these forces, preventing their conflicts from becoming so severe that the natural order is disrupted. It's a symbiotic process. The presence of a shaman brings balance and integration to the elements, while the shaman thrives and grows stronger through the power of the elements. Harry was certain that even in the world of his birth, there existed a significant degree of elemental power. This was not only because he had already summoned dormant elements, but also because this world itself exuded harmony and balance. A lack of water elements would dry up rivers. A deficiency of earth elements would render the land barren. Without wind, the air would grow stagnant, and the absence of fire would lead to decay and desolation. Both scarcity and excess are undesirable. Only balance provides the optimal environment for human survival. Based on everything Harry had observed so far, the elemental forces of this world were undoubtedly in balance. Lighting a strand of mallow and sage, Harry inhaled their smoke deeply. The soft floral fragrance carried a faint powdery texture, mingling with the sharpness of camphor. Yes, this aroma was just right. Although different worlds have distinct herbs, Harry had to admit that the centaurs of this world had chosen wisely for their rituals. It was said that centaur shamans used such methods of divination to guide their tribes. Harry found himself curious to witness how his counterparts in this world conducted their practices. However, his immediate concern was how to carve a proper totem for the ritual. In battle, totems could be directly condensed using earth elements, but those for rituals needed to be hand-carved to hold meaning and earn the element's acknowledgement. Harry had scoured his newly purchased magical books and found spells that could assist in this task. Yet after several attempts, he had to admit that his current skills were insufficient for such precise craftsmanship. Moreover, he still hadn't fully grasped the temperament of this world's elements, making it difficult to even prepare appropriate offerings. Simplicity seemed the best approach for now. Seizing the opportunity while the Dursleys were away, though they had softened toward Harry due to his promised inheritance, they would surely lose their tempers if they caught him conducting magical rituals at home. He chose a secluded corner in the shadow of the garden fence. From the refrigerator, Harry gathered fruits, Dudley's snacks, and Uncle Vernon's liquor, arranging them neatly as offerings. Summoning the power of the earth element, Harry raised a totem engraved with water patterns from the garden soil. As he chanted, he plunged it into the ground. The patterns on the totem reflected both calm serenity and turbulent waves. Next, 3 more totems emerged, each inscribed with designs representing earth, wind, and fire. They too were inserted into the ground. The carvings, drawn from Harry's knowledge of the Tauren tribes, carried a raw and primal beauty, full of strength. Storm, earth, fire, hear my call. Raising his arms, Harry cried out. Suddenly, the mallow and sage before him burst into flames. Despite being fresh and green, their leaves burned fiercely, as if they had been dried for ages. The dark green smoke didn't drift upward or follow the natural wind. Instead, it coiled around Harry's neck like a serpent, entering his nostrils. In that moment, under the intoxicating influence of the smoke, Harry's consciousness slipped into a trance. The real world faded, replaced by shifting, kaleidoscopic colors that enveloped him. He seemed to hear a deep, resonant hum, like the breathing of a giant. It was steady yet thunderous, overwhelming to mortal ears. The vision lingered. By the time the mallow and sage had burned to ash, Harry wasn't sure how much time had passed before he finally opened his eyes. He could sense the elements communicating, whispering through crashing waves, splitting lightning, and the brittle snap of dry branches. Yet their vitality was faint, as though they had suffered a cataclysm in ancient times, leaving them deeply wounded and dormant ever since. The magic Harry had previously performed was less a response from the elements themselves and more akin to the forceful manipulation seen in corrupt shamans. This is going to be a monumental task, Harry sighed deeply. In Azeroth, such a crisis, where the elements of an entire world were weak to the point of dormancy, would have prompted him to seek help from the Earthen Ring, the shamanic organization dedicated to restoring balance and power to the elements. But unfortunately, in the world of his birth, Harry suspected he was the only one who could shoulder this responsibility. His magical books had already hinted at the decline of wizards' power in this world. What could one person achieve? Even as a mage, Jaina's immense power wasn't enough to prevent Theramore from being obliterated before her eyes. And what about him? Looking down at his hands, Harry pondered. If he was to walk the shaman's path in this world and fulfill the vow he made on the day he became a shaman, to restore the elements and maintain their balance, he knew it would be a task far beyond the capability of any single individual. Perhaps, like the Tauren shaman Muln Earthfury, who founded the Earthen Ring to protect the world and maintain elemental balance, he too would need to establish an organization here. But such ambitions felt too distant for now. Harry stood up. After all, he was still a child. Few would take a child's words seriously, let alone follow their teachings. Perhaps it's time to try another approach? Harry had been about to pack up and leave when he abruptly turned back, a thought surfacing in his mind. During his curious perusal of wizarding books, he had noticed something intriguing: ghosts existed within the wizarding world. When a wizard passed away, if they harbored an unrelenting obsession or unfulfilled desires, their soul could return to this world in the form of a ghost. Souls, apart from the elements, they were another domain of expertise for a shaman. Shamans not only communicated with spirits to seek wisdom, but could also summon them to assist in work or battle. This raised a question. His parents, were they wizards too? Parents. Every time Harry encountered the word, his emotions became tangled. In his life, there were 3 couples who could claim that title. The ones he held dearest, however, were not related to him by blood. The Bloodhoof couple, the honorable Tauren who had raised him. Waving his hand, Harry dispelled the 4 totems representing the elements and chanted a spell anew. This time, under his guidance, the totem shaped by the earth element stood alone. A larger, sturdier pillar that represented ancestral worship in Tauren culture. The carvings on the totem pole depicted the heroic Tauren who had sacrificed themselves for the tribe over countless years. While Harry wasn't summoning Tauren ancestors this time, considering his true lineage, it should be fine, right? Closing his eyes, he invoked the spirits of the ancestors, a fundamental skill for any shaman. He had done it countless times and was adept at it. But this time, unlike the symbolic murmurs of the elements he usually heard, Harry found himself in a thick mist. Dark, smoky tendrils enveloped everything around him as he walked down an endless path. Beyond the road beneath his feet, there was only the boundless, deep green fog. It felt like many eyes hid within the mist, watching him. Some curious, others greedy. Was this the afterlife in the wizarding world? Harry's spiritual instincts flared, but he remained unafraid. Guided by the spirits, he pressed onward, holding onto the invisible thread that connected him to something ahead. Eventually, he saw 2 figures, a man and a woman. When Harry finally opened his eyes in the real world, he saw the 2 spirits floating before him, their faces marked by the same confusion. Their translucent, bluish-green forms differed from the pearly-white descriptions in wizarding books. Wisps of smoke trailed from their spectral bodies. Harry couldn't discern if the woman's eyes matched his emerald green, as Hagrid and Ollivander had claimed, but he could make out the man's features. The man's face bore a striking resemblance to his own. Or rather, Harry thought his face resembled the man's. Harry? The woman's trembling voice broke the silence. She reached out with both arms. Is it really you, Harry? A ghostly embrace. To be honest, it wasn't a pleasant experience. The sensation of a ghost passing through one's body was akin to being doused in icy water on a frigid winter day. A coldness that pierced both body and soul. Harry sighed and turned to look at the sorrowful woman. Her inability to physically hold him seemed to deepen her sadness. Yes, it's me, Harry hesitated, but ultimately uttered the 2 words, Mother. Relief washed over him. Back in Azeroth, Harry had resented his biological parents, wanting to question why they had abandoned him, leaving him to grow up under the scolding of his aunt and uncle. That resentment, paired with the love of the Bloodhoof couple, had driven him to abandon his human identity and grow up as a Tauren in Azeroth, and he had done so resolutely. Yet, after returning to the world of his 11-year-old self, Harry learned the truth. His biological parents hadn't abandoned him intentionally. They had died as heroes. That revelation seemed to unlock something within him. They were no different from the heroes who had sacrificed themselves to protect Azeroth. While this didn't alter Harry's established worldview or self-perception, it did allow him to release the resentment he had held toward his parents. At least, he was certain they had loved him just as the Bloodhoof family had. "And you too, father," Harry added, turning to the male spirit hovering in front of him. The man, James Potter, waggled his eyebrows and grinned as if trying to communicate silently. "Aha!" James twirled in the air. "Finally, I get to hear my child's voice. Do ghosts shed tears?" Harry could see them in his mother's eyes. Lily Potter's gaze was brimming with gratitude and joy. There was so much to say. Conversations that spanned life and death, between parents long gone and a grown child. But, pop, a faint crack, the sound of apparition, interrupted them. Harry was well acquainted with it by now. Turning toward the garden, he spotted a sullen-looking man standing in the street. Beside him, Mrs. Fig, their neighbor, was walking toward him anxiously. Both were staring in his direction. No, Harry realized, the wizard who had apparat wasn't looking at him. He was staring at the spirits beside him. His mother, Lily. The man's whispered words carried on the wind to Harry's ears. Oh, Harry thought to himself. This might get interesting. Snevelis. James Potter's disgusted voice rang out the moment he noticed the newcomer. Why is it you? Don't talk like that, James. The child is here, Lily chided. Harry couldn't tell if her ghostly punch was light or heavy, but it silenced James for a moment. The sullen man didn't seem to hear anything. His eyes remained fixed on Lily. James, however, bristled with anger. Though his ethereal form couldn't block the man's view, he positioned himself in front of Lily. Hey, Snevelis, you looking for a fight? James snapped. Stop staring at Lily. I said not in front of the child. Lily scolded, likely twisting James's ghostly arm. She floated aside and addressed the man with a complex expression. Severus, are you okay? It was as if the man had been struck by lightning. Harry could see him visibly shudder, his entire body trembling violently. Ignoring James Potter's taunts, the grim-faced man, let's just call him Snape, hurried forward eagerly at the sound of Lily Potter's call. So eager was he that he failed to notice the garden fence of the Dursley residence and walked straight into it. Snape frowned at the offending fence in irritation before performing a short-range apparition, just half a meter, right into the garden. Is it really you? Snape's lips moved as though he had countless things to say, but he ultimately pressed them into a tight line, suppressing his emotions. Harry observed Snape's eyes. They seemed hollow, unfathomably deep, as though they were voids consuming all light. Meanwhile, James Potter's spectral form zipped back and forth through Snape's body, his actions clearly intended to punish the man for his unwavering fixation on Lily. Unfortunately, it wasn't working. Snape ignored both James's ghostly presence and the icy sensations of his spectral form, keeping his focus entirely on Lily's spirit. This disregard only deepened James's frustration. Furious, James flew through Snape's body at an even faster pace. The scene was so absurdly comical that it dispelled the earlier somber atmosphere, allowing Harry to exhale a small sigh of relief. Harry glanced at Mrs. Fig in the distance. He recalled her as the odd old woman who had often babysat him when the Dursleys needed to leave him behind. Her house always smelled strongly of cabbage. Now, it seemed Mrs. Fig was connected to the wizarding world somehow. Was she stationed nearby to monitor him, or protect him? Probably protect, Harry thought. What about his younger self could possibly need monitoring? Giving Mrs. Fig a polite nod, Harry turned back to the awkward tableau of Snape and the two ghosts. Why don't we go inside and talk? He suggested thoughtfully. This is far too conspicuous. After all, translucent spirits weren't exactly everyday sights for muggles. If Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia came home to find their living room hosting a wizard and two ghosts, they'd likely faint on the spot. Luckily, they were out for the day. Inside the house, The energy shifted as soon as they entered the Dursleys' living room. Once they settled, though the ghosts floated rather than sat, the chaotic scene outside seemed to evaporate. At Lily's gentle urging, Snape began to recount everything that had transpired in the years since her and James's deaths. To say Snape was a poor storyteller would be an understatement. It seemed that articulating his feelings about these events was excruciating for him. "That's about it," Snape concluded, his tone dry and his gaze hollow. "After the Dark Lord vanished, things settled down. Over the years I followed Dumbledore's orders and became the potions master at Hogwarts." "Ha!" James sneered. "The Dark Lord? Only someone like you would call him that. Why on earth would Dumbledore let you teach? Who knows what you might do to the students?" "James!" Lily's tone was sharp, her maternal instincts evident as she tried to maintain some semblance of decorum for Harry's sake. James, naturally exuberant and quick to anger, couldn't maintain the facade for long. "No matter what I am," Snape retorted coldly, "I'm still better than someone who failed to protect his own wife and child. If you couldn't even do that, then—" He stopped himself abruptly, his fists clenching beneath his robes. Taking a deep breath, he regained his composure. A heavy silence descended. Even James was left speechless, for Snape had struck a nerve. It was the truth James most regretted and could never undo. I trusted the wrong person," James finally admitted, his voice hoarse. "Indeed. Gryffindor loyalty," Snape sneered. "Sirius Black. He betrayed Slytherin, and in the end he betrayed you too." "It wasn't Padfoot." James's shout reverberated. Through gritted teeth, he growled. "The real traitor was Wormtail. Peter." "What?" Snape's breath caught. This was why supernatural powers rendered detective work meaningless. When the dead themselves could name their killer, all investigations and deductions became moot. "Sirius wasn't the traitor," James said mournfully. "Lupin. Well, you know how he is. At the time, neither Sirius nor I felt we could fully trust him. Everyone believed Sirius was our secret keeper. Then one day, Sirius came to me with a plan. To switch to someone no one would ever suspect. Peter." Snape's voice trembled with barely restrained fury. "Then why did that idiot Black spend all those years in Azkaban? Why didn't he say a word?" Snape demanded, his anger erupting. "After you died, he blew up a street and all they found of Peter was a finger. He's a war hero who even received the Order of Merlin. Maybe it was guilt," Lily said softly, tears glistening in her spectral eyes. Everyone present understood. The hardest burden to bear was often one's own guilt. "Can I interrupt for a second?" Harry tilted his head. "Who are you even talking about?" "Oh, my boy, it's all in the past. You don't need to worry about it," James said, forcing a smile as he looked at Harry. "I just realized. If all goes well, you might not have to stay here anymore." James's gaze swept over the modest surroundings. "If Sirius were still alive, he'd be your godfather. And we all know he was innocent." James's expression grew feverishly intense as he turned to Snape, sending a shiver up the man's spine. "Snape!" James's tone was sweet, almost sickeningly so. "Severus? The greatest Slytherin of them all." "Enough! Shut up!" Snape snarled, spitting the words through gritted teeth. "That idiot? The idiot of all idiots." After finally uncovering what had truly transpired behind the scenes all those years ago, Snape could barely mention the name of that man, who thought himself so clever, without feeling like he might explode. So it was. In the entire wizarding world, it seems we were the only ones who believed he was innocent, Snape said impassively. "What they need is evidence, not just my word for it. But you'll help, won't you, Severus?" Lily said softly. "Look at this child, so frail. Petunia hasn't raised him well at all. He deserves a better home. Severus." The Dursleys' mantle was crowded with photographs, yet not a single one of Harry. In stark contrast, the pictures of Dudley depicted a robust, well-fed boy, a glaring difference from the frail child sitting here. "I will," Snape solemnly promised as he gazed at Lily's soul. Pardon me? Harry interjected. I don't really know the full history between you all, but from my perspective, I don't need someone suddenly stepping into my life, acting like a guardian and meddling in my business. I've got my own plans. Oh, Harry, of course, James said with a sorrowful look at his son. Sirius is a good man. You won't see him as some overbearing adult figure. Right? More like an energetic, foolish dog, Snape added snidely. Always bounding around. Such a typical Gryffindor. Anyway, you definitely shouldn't stay here, James said, choosing to ignore Snape's remark given the current circumstances. He placed an imaginary arm around Harry's shoulder. You ought to live in the Potter family's ancestral home. Trust me, Harry, all the good stuff's there. Without bloodline verification, no one else could access our vaults. You didn't think we'd leave the truly valuable items at Gringotts, did you? Goblins. Got it. Harry nodded. That does sound pretty great. An ancient family inheritance, coupled with answers to some of Harry's lingering questions about goblins. And perhaps we should factor in the Black family fortune too, Snape said, glancing at Lily. If that foolish dog does manage to get out, he'll surely spoil this child rotten. It's all right, Severus, Lily said gently, looking at her childhood friend. You'll still be here, won't you? You must have been through so much all these years. Her words, so tender, warmed Snape's heart like sunlight breaking through winter's chill. He held his breath instinctively. He looked at Lily, and Lily gazed back at him with a look full of compassion. For a moment, Snape felt as if he had been transported back decades, to that afternoon. The sunlight bathed her face as she turned to look at him, her lips moving as if speaking words he could no longer hear. I will, Lily, Snape rasped, his voice hoarse with emotion. I swear it. A knock came at the door. Harry got up to answer it. To no one's great surprise, Albus Dumbledore stood outside. Good afternoon, my boy. If I said long time no see, would that be too abrupt? Dumbledore said cheerfully, just as lively as when they'd first met days ago. Good afternoon, Headmaster Dumbledore. Please, come in. Harry stepped aside. Thank you, Dumbledore said with a nod as he stepped inside, speaking as he walked. Apologies for our unexpected visit, but you've likely realized by now that Mrs. Fig has been quietly protecting you all these years. I hope you don't hold it against her. Your safety is a matter of great importance to the entire wizarding world. Of course, it was Mrs. Fig who alerted us after noticing you performing a mysterious magical ritual earlier today and detecting its effects. Honestly, I should have come myself, but the ministry summoned me for urgent matters. I had no choice but to send our potions master in my place. Oh, Dumbledore stopped mid-sentence, stunned. Well, this is quite the unexpected reunion, isn't it? As he walked through the corridor and caught sight of the scene in the living room, understanding dawned on him. He glanced at Harry and winked. It seems I've uncovered why our potions master has been slow to respond, haven't I? Long time no see, James Lily, Dumbledore said with delight. At last I can properly use that phrase. It seems you've had a marvelous adventure unbeknownst to us. Indeed, Professor Dumbledore, James replied with a grin. It's been the most wonderful adventure. Shared experiences often lead to endless conversations after a long separation. There was so much for everyone to catch up on. Meanwhile, Harry quietly listened, piecing together the events of the past from the fragments of information. His father had 3 friends he treated as brothers, but the 4 of them had clashed with Professor Snape, largely because of his mother. Harry decided to ignore the romantic entanglements of the previous generation. As someone with experience from another world, he was all too familiar with such things, even the blood elf Prince Kale that's had once challenged him to a duel over similar issues. Ultimately, his father had emerged victorious, and Harry, the child born from that union, had no complaints. His family had been targeted by Voldemort because his father trusted the wrong person. One of those trusted brothers betrayed him, leading directly to their deaths. Of the remaining 2, one had wandered for years due to special circumstances, while the other, consumed by guilt, had punished himself by staying in prison. Most astonishingly, the latter was Harry's godfather. What could he say? Harry could only reflect that behind every tale of suffering lies a story full of twists and turns. So that's how it was, Dumbledore murmured, deep in thought. The events back then, now it all makes sense. Rest assured, James Lily, Dumbledore said, his expression turning grave. I will investigate this matter as thoroughly as I can and seek evidence to prove Sirius's innocence. But you must understand, the real obstacle lies with Sirius himself. He has refused to come forward. If he had spoken up back then, he wouldn't have stayed silent when he was captured. And it has been many years since. Without solid evidence, even I would find it exceedingly difficult to overturn the case. Dumbledore sighed, his tone heavy with regret. Many of the events from that time have already been sealed and forgotten. Even with concrete evidence, it wouldn't be easy, Snape remarked sarcastically. That Minister of Magic cares only about his approval ratings. Reopening this case would be political suicide. Oh, Severus, let's not be so absolute, Dumbledore replied with a gentle smile. After all, Fudge wasn't even in office during Sirius's trial. Thank you so much, Professor Dumbledore, James and Lily said in unison, their gratitude evident. No need for thanks. Seeing justice prevail is something we all hope for, Dumbledore replied, waving their gratitude aside. Then, his expression shifted to one of curiosity. But, after all that, might I ask a question to satisfy my curiosity? He looked intently at the spectral forms of James and Lily. As far as I know, 11 years ago, neither of you lingered as ghosts after your deaths. Why, then, are you appearing in this form now? James and Lily exchanged a glance. To be honest, we're not entirely sure what we are now, James admitted candidly. In the afterlife, Lily and I suddenly heard Harry's voice and saw him before us. And then, somehow, we were here again. It was a perfect answer because it left Dumbledore completely baffled. Harry's call. Dumbledore turned to Harry, his eyes narrowing. Could it be what Mrs. Figg described? That mysterious magical ritual? The one I witnessed a few days ago. Something you can summon at will. Harry hesitated briefly before nodding. You could say that, Headmaster. It's a kind of talent I have. After Hagrid took me to Diagon Alley, I read about ghosts in some wizarding books and wondered if I could see my parents. So I tried calling them. Harry smiled faintly. The word talent saved him from having to explain too much. Why can't you do it? Why don't you understand? Because you lack talent. Without it, you just won't get it. Perfect. I was born with it. Even Dumbledore seemed taken aback, staring at Harry as though he'd just seen a flobberworm swallow a dragon, or Grindelwald performing ballet in Paris Square. Snape opened his mouth to sneer, but at the sight of Lily's spirit, he stopped himself. Barely. I think we've found this year's recipient for the Merlin Medal, Snape muttered, his sarcasm barely masking his disbelief. To be fair, Harry's explanation was so absurd it bordered on fantastical, even for the magical world. Oh, Severus, perhaps we underestimate the wonders young wizards can achieve, Dumbledore said humorously, polishing his glasses. Harry, this magic of yours, can it be used on others? Could you summon the souls of others? This was the real question. Dumbledore's gaze was sharp, probing for the truth. Yes, Harry replied simply. As long as there's a blood connection and love and longing, their ancestors will answer the call. Oh, not exactly ancestors, Dumbledore murmured under his breath. Would you like me to perform the ritual for you, Headmaster? Harry asked, raising an eyebrow. For a long moment, Dumbledore was silent. Finally, he shook his head. Not for now. Then, as if to change the subject, he added, incidentally, the Ministry summoned me today because of an anomaly in the death chamber at the Department of Mysteries, a place where wizards study the mysteries of death. His gaze returned to Harry, heavy with meaning. The disturbance occurred this afternoon, shortly after your ritual, I suspect. The implication was clear. I know you're talented, Harry, far beyond your years, Dumbledore said sincerely. But I must ask you to use this power cautiously. Will you? Of course, Harry agreed. If you ever need my help, Headmaster, just let me know. I'll be happy to assist. Dumbledore seemed satisfied, though the question of why he refused Harry's offer lingered. Perhaps it was a matter of privacy, or perhaps something else entirely. As Dumbledore and Snape took their leave, Harry bowed slightly. May the Earth Mother watch over you. Snape, glancing repeatedly at Lily's spirit, walked out reluctantly. Magic was still magic, Harry mused. He would never bind his parents' souls to remain with him, knowing they couldn't linger long. Lily, however, wished to speak to her sister, Petunia, before departing. How Petunia would react to seeing her sister's spirit. Well, Harry was already upstairs when that encounter took place. Whatever shrieks or crashes came from downstairs, he paid them no mind. He had more important things to do, like studying. Wizarding textbooks were fascinating. Harry's last month at the Dursleys was exceptionally enjoyable. He could study magic freely, wield spells to his heart's content, and indulge himself in the thrill of being a true wizard. This time, even if Jaina jumped up and down mocking him for being nothing more than a borrower of elemental power, Harry could confidently retort, "Laugh all you want. I'm a wizard too. Wizardry. Thrilling. Magic. Fantastic." Harry also grew accustomed to the wand, a wizard's signature tool. To him, it was like the war blades of a demon hunter, specialized equipment that significantly amplified a wizard's spellcasting power. It helped regulate and channel magical energy, improving both control and endurance. A purple epic, Ollivander's wand, purple quality, 7 galleons apiece, guaranteed genuine with a 10-fold refund for counterfeits. Limited supply. Hurry while stocks last. The wizarding world was downright extravagant. Before Hogwarts reopened, Harry finally received the equipment he had been waiting for. A warhammer paired with a shield and a set of half-body chainmail. The moment he donned the chainmail, even though some parts were still missing, an invisible sense of security filled his heart. Yes, this was the right feeling. Picking up the warhammer, he gave it a test swing. Neither too heavy nor too light, just perfect. Goblin craftsmanship truly lived up to its reputation, and the size suited Harry's current age. Of course, he'd need to commission a new one as he grew older. "Phew, my work here is done. Time to settle the bill," Coppering said, wiping non-existent sweat off his forehead. "Honestly, it's a good thing this was your order and just a toy. Otherwise, we'd have landed in big trouble." "What do you mean?" Harry asked, raising an eyebrow at Coppering. "I've read your history. Goblins are only forbidden from using wands, right? Technically, magical weapons, especially enchanted armor, are also off-limits," Coppering replied with a dismissive wave. "The Ministry got wind of something and came sniffing around. Luckily, what we made for you isn't in violation. Even a Muggle blacksmith could craft this." "I see," Harry nodded. "That makes sense. Armor is indeed more critical. After all, once someone donned magical armor, many spells would struggle to harm them. That wouldn't bode well for wizards trying to control goblins, who had previously staged multiple rebellions." Harry had already noticed that wizards in this world were generally quite frail physically. "Oh, you've no idea what we goblins endure," Coppering grumbled. "I do, you lost," Harry replied mercilessly. "Here's your payment." "Ha, fair enough. We lost. But at least we're getting paid," Coppering muttered under his breath. "Stop complaining, Coppering," Harry said as he turned to leave. "Among goblins, at least you're one with a good reputation. That counts for something." "What's the use of a good reputation?" Coppering yawned. "At the Gringotts' annual meeting, I can't even get a seat at the table. Most days, I'm just stuck guarding the door to make a living." "Your time will come," Harry said earnestly. "I have an idea, though it's not something I can act on right now. But when the time comes, if you're willing to trust me, you might just get a shot at striking it rich. Then maybe you'll earn that seat at the table." "Are you serious?" Coppering paused, scrutinizing the famous wizard before him. Harry, clad in matte-finished chainmail, had his warhammer strapped to his side and a shield slung over his back. He was now wrapping himself in a cloak to avoid drawing too much attention. "Of course. I'm Harry Potter, he said, leaning into his notoriety. Well then, big shot. Coppering extended his hand after a moment of thought, recalling the newspaper articles about this boy. I'll wait. Goblins live long enough, after all. The friendship of a Tauren will not disappoint you, Harry said, shaking the goblin's hand. Yeah, a Tauren, Coppering muttered, eyeing the small horns protruding naturally from either side of Harry's forehead. Compared to other children his age, Harry's greatest strengths were his patience and a level of understanding far beyond his years. At 11, few kids could sit still and work through dense, text-heavy books with no illustrations. After thoroughly reading Hogwarts, a history of modern magic, significant magical events of the 20th century, and the rise and fall of the dark arts, Harry had a rough grasp of the wizarding world's history and current state. He also understood what had happened 11 years ago and why he was so famous and well-liked. Studying history makes one wise, though, unfortunately, humanity's greatest lesson from history seemed to be that humans never learn from history. At least Harry now knew what topics were taboo among wizards. Ignoring the peculiar looks others gave him, Harry dragged his luggage to King's Cross Station, searching for platform 9 3/4 as Hagrid had instructed. There were platforms 9 and 10, but no sign of 9 3/4. Was this another of the wizarding world's little jokes? Harry began examining the walls, thinking of how the brick wall at the Leaky Cauldron led to Diagon Alley. Excuse me, a tired voice suddenly spoke from behind him. Could you hurry onto the platform? Keeping muggles from noticing anything unusual here is exhausting. And you, of all people, are particularly conspicuous. What's with those horns? The voice turned to a frustrated growl by the end. Turning around, Harry saw a witch glaring at him, wand in hand. A ministry official? Harry asked curiously. Obviously, though I'm only an intern, the witch said with a proud toss of her hair before clenching her teeth again. I don't want to get fired over something as trivial as helping first year's board unnoticed. So could you kindly move those legs of yours and step onto the platform? As she spoke, her hair shifted from black to fiery red, then deepened to a dusky crimson.
Thanks waiting for next episode.